Mm. Do you
Yeah.
think, Miriam, do you think that the suppression of, so I agree with you that you cannot force democracy by suppressing Islamist or Islamic democratic parties, because that's totally counterintuitive. I mean, the equivalent from the other perspective, like in France, when they try to enforce secularism by banning the wearing of the kippah or the cross or the hijab in public sphere, that is an ideology.
Ben Ali banned to some extent wearing the hijab as well under his regime.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
So this
certain,
completely undermines
yeah.
the whole point of secularism and democracy. I agree with you on this.
Yeah, it
That's
wouldn't
the
work.
thing,
You'll just get a
that's the thing,
backlash.
yeah.
You get resentment and backlash, and it
Exactly.
just doesn't work.
Here's the thing. Ben Ali was also, a lot of people spoke against Ben Ali and were imprisoned who were actually for secularism and leftists. That's the thing. A lot of people who actually spoke against him weren't actually Islamists.
Do you think that the suppression of Islamic institutions led to radicalization in Tunisia, or the export of foreign fighters?
I'd like to jump in after.
Fine, yeah. Miriam, do you have an opinion on this before Ziriab jumps in?
I think it played a role. I think it did. Because it kind of like him forcing a secular state while disregarding like a specific train thought kind of backfired on him. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people, again, were for this, were for Islamic thought, for al-Nahdha. A lot of people agreed with their ideology and kind of backfired on him.
Sure. Ziria?
Mm-hmm. Okay,
so
yeah. I think, the answer to your question, as far as I'm concerned, is no. I don't think it lended itself to extremism, or it lended itself to radicalization at all. I think I would go as far as to say that the arrival of Ennahda, the arrival of the guide of the Brotherhood, of the Muslim Brotherhood in Tunisia, Rashid al-Nushi, he came back in spectacular fashion, much like Khomeini did from France when he arrived back from France and he ran to all the fanfare and became top guy there. Al-Nushi came about in a similar fashion in terms of the fanfare, and then obviously went through elections and whatnot. But the point is that this is why the whole point of persecution and whatnot is the reason why Al-Nushi was imprisoned numerous times in Tunisia before he found asylum in the UK was because he attempted coup d'etat. Because the organization around Al-Nushi tried to do a coup d'etat in '87. He first went off to Sudan, where he got exiled, and the guide of the revolution there, Hassan al-Turabi, who was in Turkey, who was in Sudan, gave him asylum. Then he went off to Turkey. Then he went over to in Turkey. Obviously, Erdogan was probably the mayor of Istanbul at that point. And then in '93, he entered Londonistan. Do you know what I mean? So that's he entered Londonistan, and he was chilling there until he was able to go back to Tunisia. So the issue is, when you're framing him as some type of, persecuted, no, the reason why he was in prison is because they tried a coup. And if you try the same thing in this country, if you try that in any country, you are going to get the long arm of the law knocking on the door. That's the long and short. But you can't make him out to be some type of martyr if he's going against the setup there. In any case, what I would argue is that the arrival of Ennahda emboldened extremists. It emboldened the Islamists, and we see that emboldening in the fact that assassinations occurred up and down the country. Now, what I was arguing for is that the League for the Protection of the Revolution, that's the term, and this is the equivalent of the secret wing or the secret branch that's within the Muslim Brotherhood. It's well attested to. There's a number of literature, numerous literature you can look up in terms of a study of the Muslim Brotherhood, how it was organized, and the secret branch, which was tasked with, as the name suggests, secret operations, military operations, as opposed to the political operations. So I would argue that the arrival of Ennahda emboldened Islamists, and we're seeing right now, we see the fact that the Syrians, as you said, Syrians arriving through Tunisia into Libya. I don't think that would have occurred in any other situation.
the arrival of Tunisian forces, Tunisian fighters in Libya. Okay? So your position is that Ennahda's presence in Tunisia emboldened these fighters. There are some people that believe that Tunisian fighters in Libya were actually political fighters, but they were framed as ISIS fighters. So do you think that their ideology or their identity or connection with Libya is one of a pan-Islamic ideology, or is it like a North African kind of political, and we need to help our neighbors, this kind of?
Right, interesting. That's a good question. I think I would go to the former. I think it's more to do with the ideology of pan-Islamism, the Salafist ideology, or the Islamist Salafist ideology of
Pan-Islamism. Okay, what do the other people in the conversation say?
I just was going to ask Saeed then if he's kind of trying to dispute Miriam's earlier contention that the prominence of Ennahda as a sign of a healthy democracy in Tunisia. He's saying that they embolden the more radical Islamist forces within the country. So are you trying to dispute that point?
Say that again. I don't think I heard it. What'd you say?
Miriam said earlier that the prominence of Ennahda in Tunisia was a sign of a kind of a healthy democracy there. I'm wondering if you're trying to dispute that point, maybe indirectly, by saying that actually the success of Ennahda was what emboldened the kind of radical Islamists. Obviously, that's not a very good thing to have, and that's not very healthy. So are you just trying to add some nuance to the conversation, or are you saying that the Ennahda's success is a net negative overall? Or I'm just wondering what your overall view is on that.
Right, in terms of value, I wouldn't make a value judgment or value. Yeah, I wouldn't make a value judgment on it. I'm simply illustrating how the arrival of Ennahda was followed up with a space of assassinations that targeted dissidents. So it's very interesting, isn't it, that the so-called people who were persecuted become prominent in power and then go on to persecute others. So, I mean, obviously it's not been proven in a court of law yet, but the fact that Ennahda was in political power whilst these assassinations were ongoing is what makes me make the statement that, the arrival of Ennahda emboldened the Islamists in the country.
My main question when it comes to any kind of a religious political party is always, when trying to suss them out, is their commitment to democracy genuine, or do they see it as only a tool to kind of gain greater religious power to the point where they can eventually discard it? If you see what I mean, like, do you believe that Ennahda, how committed to democratic values do you think they really are?
Can I come in on this point?
Yeah.
So if you look at Said Qutb's work in Egypt, I believe it was Milestones where he mentioned this.
I know.
He essentially, it's essentially an Islamist text that talks about, the role of like Islamic political institutions in Arab governance. He makes the claim that you can use democracy as a means to an end of implementing his undemocratic take of Sharia law in the system, and then discard of democracy once you've done that, right? Now, I think Ziryab is making a really good point, because if we're going to say that, it was my opinion in this chat earlier, that you cannot suppress Islamist ideology because it becomes undemocratic. But then Islamist ideology could